guys, it's Julie Spencer, author of the Buxton Peak series, and we are part of the way into Buxton Peak Book 3, The End of the Beginning, and we are starting into Chapter 6, which is called, And the Winner Is. How long ago did you guys win New Artist of the Year at the American Music Awards? Jeremy mused, as if he didn't already know the exact date and time. He was sauntering across the practice room as if bored. 6 years ago last November, Ian strummed a chord on an acoustic guitar, mostly ignoring his manager. And Best Rock Group at the Teen Choice Awards? 5 years ago in August. Why? Ian narrowed his eyes. Where's he going with this? How about Top Hot 100 Song? Jeremy raised his eyebrows up and down. That stopped Ian short. The only time they'd gone to the billboards was when they won Top Rock Album 3 years ago. That could only mean one thing. Passing Through Eternity has been nominated for Best Song of the whole year? That is correct, Jeremy laughed. You're going to the Billboard Music Awards. Do the other guys know? Ian asked. I wanted to tell you first, since you wrote the song. Plus, I have a question for you. Jeremy hesitated. How would you feel about inviting Gary to the awards show? That would be great, Ian said. Do you know where he is? I'm working on it. Jeremy pulled up a chair, turned it around and sat down, leaning against the back and resting his arms on the top. I just have one condition, Ian said. I want Nathaniel with us as well. He's part of Buxton Peak now. I'm not excluding him just because Gary was there at the time the song was written and originally performed. I think that's fair, Jeremy acknowledged. They also want to know if you'd like to perform that night. I don't think we're ready for that, Ian shook his head. We haven't even announced our next tour dates, and we're not done learning the sets. I don't want there to be an awkward moment where we kick Gary off the stage so that Nathaniel can play with us. No, it's not time yet. I agree, Jeremy nodded. We'll leave it at that. All 5 of you will sit in the audience together, and then if you win, you'll go up there as a group. That sounds like a plan, Ian confirmed. Maybe we should announce our tour dates between now and then, and that night we could officially introduce Nathaniel to the world. We've been rehearsing openly for weeks, but we've never held a press conference or anything. I think that can be arranged. I'll get to work on finalizing plans for tour dates, and I'll let the producers know. This is going to be exciting. Next phase in our career is about to begin, mate, Ian smiled. Did you ever guess we'd take it this far? Honestly, Jeremy started to shake his head, but nodded wholeheartedly. Yes, I did. The first time I saw you, I knew there was something special about you. When I heard you play, I was ready to sign you immediately. When you pulled that crazy stunt of leaving all of us for 2 years, I thought you were daft out of your mind, till I heard you speak in church, and I just knew that God was going to bless you for your dedication, sacrifice, and commitment. I just knew it. That's when I knew we were going all the way together. It was like God spoke to my heart and gave me peace that day. That's really deep, mate. Why didn't you ever tell me that? It would have gone to your head, Jeremy laughed. You were such a cocky little thing back then. Still are sometimes. Why does everybody want to call me little? Ian pouted. I'm not that little. Comparatively, Nathaniel boomed from behind him. Ian hadn't realized the rest of the band had begun shuffling into the studio, ready to warm up. Yes, you are. Thanks, pal. Ian frowned. Any time, brother. Nathaniel slapped him on the back playfully. And the winner is... The young actress hesitated for dramatic effect. Then she and her co-presenter announced together, Passing Through Eternity by Buxton Peak. The audience rose to its feet in celebration, and the television cameras panned to the section of the auditorium where the entire entourage sat together with wives, girlfriends, bodyguards, and their manager. Each of the guys hugged his girl and high-fived or fist-bumped one another, and then the 5 band members of Buxton Peak headed up to the stage. It was a strange assortment of characters. Ian felt bad for Gary. His former band, together with their new drummer, was winning an award for a song Gary didn't help write, would never perform again, and wasn't sober enough to remember anyway. He played along. He smiled when he was supposed to smile, climbed the stairs right along with everyone else as if it was a normal day. But it was strained. It was all very strained. Nathaniel looked as if he was gritting his teeth. He and Gary had a tense moment when meeting for the first time, sat on opposite ends of the group, and now stood on opposite ends of the stage. Neither of them looked happy. Ian took to the microphone first, but had to wait at least a minute for the audience to calm down and the girls in the balcony to finish screaming. When it was finally almost quiet, one last girl called out, "We love you!" And that was the first issue Ian addressed when he spoke. "We love you too," he called, and then had to wait again while the crowd roared. Finally, things calmed down and he began again. "Seriously, though, you are the best fans ever, and we wouldn't be where we are today without your support." More screaming, more applause, more smiles. Then Ian got down to a little more business and addressed to the obvious. "As I'm sure you're aware, Buxton Peak has made some changes in recent months." He stopped and grinned over at Nathaniel. "We have an extra mate with us now. I'd like to introduce our new drummer, Nathaniel Jackson." The crowd applauded and squealed with excitement and anticipation. Nathaniel didn't seem entirely ready for the unearned fame of being in Buxton Peak, but he waved and smiled. "I want to let you know that our mate Gary Owens will be taking a little break from our crew." Ian pulled Gary over and they draped arms over one another's shoulders as the crowd booed. Gary waved just a little, similar to how Nathaniel had done. "We've been together since we were teenagers in Derbyshire, and we're going to miss him, but we wish him the best of luck." With that, Ian pulled away from Gary and led the applause. And then Ian stepped back to allow Gary time at the microphone. Gary didn't step up to speak, just waved to the crowd, and they applauded and screamed for him. After a few awkward seconds, Kai stepped up to the microphone to offer some traditional acknowledgments, thanking their manager, Jeremy, their families and friends and fans, record label and producers. Ian came back to the microphone and said what everyone was waiting to hear. "I would be remiss not to offer appreciation and love for the woman who inspired our song, my wife, Megan." Ian looked down at her and they smiled at one another. She even blew him a little kiss from across the way, and the crowd loved it. The fans in the balcony chanted her name the same way they had at the concert in Copenhagen, and Megan stood, turned around, and waved at them. That drew more applause as she sat down. Ian closed out his comments with one more cliche but expected recognition. "Most importantly, I have to give all the credit to God, without whom none of this would be possible. After all, it is His eternity that we are all just passing through." That brought another thunderous applause, and the five guys stood side by side with arms around each other's shoulders one last time before walking off the stage together. That was the first and last time Buxton Peak was complete. Excuse me. "How are you feeling, really?" Ian poked Gary on the leg, urging him to meet Ian's gaze. "Don't lie to me." "I'm fine." Gary's eyes shifted somewhere off Ian's shoulder and he folded his arms across his chest. There wasn't much to look at in the small dressing room. "You're stoned," Ian said. "I'm not stupid." "How is that different than any time you've seen me in the last few years?" "I'm fine." Gary had taken a sudden interest in the pattern on the sofa cushion. The room was surprisingly quiet considering how many people were still backstage at the awards show. Ian was glad to have a few minutes alone with Gary. It had been too long since they'd seen each other and they hadn't left on good terms. "What happened to getting help?" Ian asked. "I don't need any help." Gary's hard eyes focused on Ian as best as he was capable. "You know I'm here for you, right? You can talk to me, pal." "No, Ian, you're not here for me. You've moved on, and I'm done with all of it. The band, the traveling, the fighting, I'm done. We had a fun go of it, but it's over. Buxton Peak is over." Buxton Peak is not over, Ian thought. He sat back and folded his arms, glad he hadn't voiced his opinion out loud. But Gary was right about one thing. He was done. Ian had known it for a long time, but this conversation cemented the decision. Gary Smith was no longer a member of Buxton Peak. "But you'll always be one of my best mates," Ian thought. "How can I help you see that?" Ian's throat tightened. He forced out a whisper. What are your plans? What are you planning on doing now?" "Go back to Manchester," Gary said, as if he was stating the obvious. "I want to go home. I want to rest." I want to drive up onto the peaks and stare up into the gray sky and do nothing. Ian could picture Gary doing just that. His glazed eyes painted that vision of Gary's current reality. He wasn't living on the same plane where Ian was. He was too far gone. Ian couldn't help it this time. A tear escaped down the side of his cheek, and he turned away. His whisper was barely audible, even to himself. I love you, Gary. I love you too, pal. Gary stood up, put his hand on Ian's shoulder, and walked from the room. What's all this? Monique pushed open the door to the backstage holding room along with Vanessa, Rhonda, and finally Megan. Ian's heart raced as he suddenly realized how this must look. An all-girl singing group of 4 very nice-looking ladies was sitting casually with an all-guy rock band in a small private room discussing possibility of going on tour with them. Buxton Peak had yet to decide who'd open for them on their first tour in over a year, and someone suggested they consider these relatively new performers. The 2 groups met backstage at the awards show to see if they'd be a good fit, and were sitting around laughing and talking when the wives and girlfriends walked in together. All conversation stopped, and proverbial daggers flew between the 2 sets of women, the committed relationships versus the potential mistresses. The situation reminded Ian why the phrase, "avoid the appearance of evil," was so important. Ian and Nathaniel were the first 2 to hop off their chairs and rush to their wives' sides. It was actually quite telling about the higher level of commitment that existed between a husband and wife rather than just a live-in boyfriend and girlfriend. Andy was the next to hurry to Vanessa's side, but Ian actually saw a slight spark fly between Kai and one of the girls. Still, he strode over to Rhonda and held out his arm as if to remind her that she was the woman who would be on his arm for the remainder of the evening, and the one with whom he would go home. I knew this was going to happen. Monique shoved Nathaniel away and folded her arms across her chest, pinching her lips together. Well, I can see the party's over, one of the female singers mumbled. The 4 girls rose from their seats and made their way toward the door. They smiled coyly at the guys, and the one winked at Kai as she sashayed by. The lead singer turned back. Let us know what you decide. I've already decided, Ian said, shaking his head. I don't think it's a good idea. Good luck to you, ladies. He tried to sound insistent and dismissive, leaving no doubt in anyone's minds. Ian turned around to find 4 women glaring at him. He raised his eyebrows. Don't worry, it's not happening. We'll find a nice fledgling rock band of talented guys to open for us. Don't worry? Megan's lips shook and a hint of moisture was in her eyes. But what caught Ian's attention was the hardness in her expression. Anger mixed with sadness, mixed with betrayal. Wouldn't you worry if you walked into a tiny room to find us surrounded by guys who were looking at us like they wanted to rip our clothes off and take advantage of us? They weren't doing that. Ian tried to laugh off the situation, but realized Megan's assessment wasn't far from the truth. Since his early teens, girls had been looking at him that way. It usually didn't bother him because he knew it would never go beyond that. But Andy, Gary, and especially Kai had too frequently taken advantage of these exact situations. This would be the first tour where they were in committed relationships, and the flirting had to stop. Yeah, they were, Megan said, stomping off in the direction of Ian's personal dressing room. Ian quickly followed. He closed the door behind them, afraid she'd slam it if given the chance. She turned to him with vitriol in her eyes. You flirt with women all the time. I've never said anything to you about it because it's just your personality, but I don't think you fully realize the way you affect girls when you do that. It confuses them. It makes them think they stand a fighting chance with you. Well, they don't, Ian said. You of all people should know that. I also think it kind of excites you. Her voice lowered in frustration. What? Ian creased his eyebrows. What do you think, that I flirt with other women and come home and make love to my wife? Is that what you think? You said it, not me. She shrugged and folded her arms across her chest. Maybe you're right, Ian admitted. Megan's head snapped up. My personality is very flirtatious. The guys told me that a long time ago. They also told me I shouldn't change a thing about myself because that's just the way I am. My personality is what has gotten us this far. That's not exactly fair to me, is it? Megan sat on the arm of the sofa. You liked my flirtatious personality when we first met. Admit it. He came over and brushed a stray hair from her forehead. That's when I thought you were only flirting with me, Megan said. I never realized you were flirting with hundreds of girls. You could have a girl in every city you travel. I know it by the way they look at you. All you guys would have had to do tonight was reach over and lock that door, and none of us girls would have known a thing. You're right. Ian raised his eyebrows, challenging her right back. And did we? No, Megan whispered. She picked a piece of lint from her vintage cocktail dress. Ian reached out and tilted her chin with one finger. Her beautiful hazel eyes shone in the soft light of the dressing room. I have never locked the door to my dressing room, Ian said. Believe me, I've had thousands of chances. Do you know how many girls I've kissed in my lifetime? Megan gulped. I'm afraid to ask. 3. Ian raised his eyebrows and Megan's jaw dropped. A cute little redhead in high school who, believe me, wanted more than a kiss. A semi-serious relationship after my mission, and the most beautiful woman in the world, you. I'm not the most beautiful woman in the world, Megan said. I'm not glamorous or exciting or fun. There's nothing remotely sexy about me. I can understand why you'd think about other women when you're stuck with me. Look at me, Megan. Ian lifted her from the arm of the sofa, but didn't pull her into his arms. He scooted her over so that she was sitting on the cushions and knelt in front of her. I am not stuck with you. I chose you, and you chose me. Am I right? Yeah. Megan reached up and ran her fingers through his hair. Ian shivered. Nothing in the world felt as good as when she touched him. He forced himself to focus. God brought us together because we were meant to be together, Ian whispered. I don't see anyone else but you. You are everything to me. You have been since the first time I saw you from across the room and knew who you were instinctively. You are the woman God made for me, and I am the man God made for you. Not because you're beautiful or exciting or sexy, which you are, by the way. He ran his hands along the outside of her legs, loving the chiffon dress that draped across her lap. Her breathing increased and a passion entered her expression. I love you because you are my eternal companion. Ian's hands wrapped around her waist firmly. Our marriage is forever and our love is forever. You're everything to me. Ian, you're everything to me too, Megan whispered. She rested her hands on his forearms and squeezed gently. I knew it the day we met. I just fought it because I felt so inferior. I mean, look at you. You're drop-dead handsome with an amazing voice and eyes that make me melt. You captured my heart the minute you started talking to me. You looked at me as if you already knew me and already loved me before we met. I did, he reminded her. I've loved you forever. And you know what else? My hair is going to fall out someday, and I'm probably going to get fat and lazy, and I might even lose my singing voice and be old and wrinkly. Will you still love me then? Of course, she chuckled. She reached up and touched the side of his face where laugh lines were sure to materialize in the years to come. I'll love you no matter how wrinkly you get. Someday your hair is going to turn silver, and this dress might get too tight on you, and I'm still going to want you just as much as I do right this minute. Ian raised his eyebrows suggestively and pulled gently at the silky fabric. Right here, right now, would she be willing? It was worth a try. You know, maybe we shouldn't wait until this dress gets too tight. Maybe we should just take it off right now. Right now? Megan lifted one eyebrow and scooted closer on the sofa. Are you suggesting we should lock that door? I don't know. Ian's heart raced. I promised myself years ago I'd never lock the door to my dressing room. Are you ready to break that promise to yourself? Megan asked, biting her lower lip. More than you could possibly imagine. Ian's husky voice pierced through her whisper. I have a really creative imagination, Megan whispered. Ian didn't hesitate. He lifted himself off his knees and stepped over to the door. With one hand he turned the lock. With the other he flicked off the light, knowing it wouldn't be difficult to find that sofa in the dark. That is the end of chapter 6. Next time we will read chapter 7 on solid ground.